Indiana County 911. My brother's gone. Can you be a little more specific, sir? He took my brother. Who took him? I don't know who took him. I don't know what. Sir, take a breath. Explain to me what happened.
And I looked out and there was this big red blinking UFO.
I can just say this. Something's going on in the woods. Something's going on.
They're not dogs, they're not coyotes. What could it be, right?
I had an encounter with a skunk ape, and it completely altered the course of my life.
I found a skull. I think you guys are going to want to come film this.
Put him out, put him out, put him out, put him out, put him out.
What about? I just see it.
Sightings of a UFO hovering over a barn.
Millie woke up from a dream, and when I went into the bedroom, she said there's a monster on the wall.
They saw that the creature had run through a barbed wire fence. They were able to obtain hairs. They sent the hairs to their lab, and it came back as an unknown creature.
Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin.
What is up, Bizarrites, and welcome back to the most bizarre show on the internet. I am the one that, like, two people call Shayn Squatch.
And I am the one that probably less than that calls the big bad boo daddy Orin Felix.
I think more people call you the big bad boo daddy than call me Shayn Squatch. I think I'm like the main one that calls me Shayn Squatch.
I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not that people call me the big bad boo daddy, but
sounds a little dirty.
Anyway, so this is our first official episode since we've been back from Snarly Owl Cryptid Halloween 3. So we thought we'd just give you guys a quick little rundown of the event. First off, big thanks to our buddy Dave for inviting us out, inviting us to speak and MC. He's always a pleasure. You guys follow him on Instagram at The Snarly Owl. Check out any of his events if you're around the West Virginia area. But Shayn, is there anything you'd like to kind of kick off our little recap with?
So as far as the event goes, of course, a lot of fun. We ended up getting to meet some more people that we had met last year. We ended up getting to hang out with Diego from Let's Find Out with Diego. He's a really fun guy. Got to hang out with Kevin from Where the Weird Ones Are. Of course, Dave. And another shout out to Jessie, who was a previous guest on the show, talking about Wizard Clip and stuff. She was another vendor there. And then, you know, the speakers and stuff. Jesse ended up being a speaker. Kevin was a speaker. All around, man. It was a really fun event. A lot of really awesome people. And, you know, it may not have been like, you know, a giant event, but everybody that was there, it's one of those events that just kind of feels very close and very like family type of oriented. So, I mean, just kind of a little bit of it like D-tier away from like how a lot of cryptid events are, where they don't really feel like they're, you know, fully family friendly because, you know, they're like speaking, like this kind of stuff. Like this event, at least, I think is like one of those perfect events where, you know, the kids can go and have fun and stuff. And another fun comment that I didn't even know was going to end up happening, and I'm glad that you ended up bringing candy. They had this like trick or treat thing going on, like while we were doing like the vending and stuff. So like, props that you ended up bringing the candy, because I had no idea that was even happening.
No, it was super cool. The event where it was held this year, the venue was awesome. A huge step up from last year. Yeah, a lot of the kids trick-or-treating, just the venue could not have been better. I think it's really cool just in the couple years we've done this event to see it grow. So many vendors selling some awesome stuff. I think it's going to be really cool to see this event grow throughout the years. And, you know, Dave is the nicest guy on the planet. So, I mean, all the best to him for putting on such cool events, and he deserves all the success and the love he can get from this event. And hopefully it just keeps growing, and we can't wait to go back next year if we're invited. So.
And just another quick shout out, because we forgot to mention them too, but they're two good friends, so we have to make sure we mention them. Joe from Cryptoteology, of course, was also vending, and so was Lisa from Cryptid Comfort. So we have to give a shout out to those two, because those two are definitely friends of the community too.
Yeah, we had a lot of friends there, so it was cool to see everybody and catch up a little bit. And like I said, hope to do it again next year.
Oh yeah, looking forward to next year. And again, last week it fell on Halloween, so that's the only reason we didn't drop the normal episode. But luckily, you know, our live was able to be recorded and stuff. So hopefully next year we can do the same thing for you guys, be able to record it, and hopefully there'll be, you know, more people interacting a bit in the audience and stuff, because that was still kind of a new thing this year where people weren't really used to having speakers at this event like that. But hopefully next year it'll grow and we can bring you guys an even better show. But
So Shayna, why don't you tell everybody your other news and updates and piece of business?
So news and updates. So as everybody kind of saw leading up to this event, this was the first event that I introduced Bizarre Teas, my like little tea blend company that I'm working on. And so in order to kind of promote that, spread it out a little bit, I'm doing a Bizarre Teas giveaway. And in order to enter that, all you have to do is go and follow Bizarre Teas on Instagram. There is a link for that down in the show description, so you guys can find it quick and easy. But all you have to do to enter, just make sure you're following the page. And at the end of November, I will do a random number drawing with all the followers to the page. And whoever wins will get to sample both of the flavors that I have so far of Bizarre Teas, which is the Sasquatch blend in a dried apple flavor and also in a mint flavor. And kind of expanding a little bit more off of that too, trying to set up a little bit more with this tea thing. As far as the Patreon goes, I added a new tier called the Bizarre Teas Tea Club. And with that, you'd get every single thing you get with every single tier with the Patreon. And you'll also get, every month you'll get 2 bags of Bizarre Teas, whatever flavors you want. And as I create new flavors, you will also be one of the first people that gets to sample them, give me some thoughts, tell me what you think might need to be changed, if you think it needs to be a little bit sweeter, all that kind of stuff. So definitely something cool to go and check out if you guys are interested in getting a little bit more involved with Bizarre Teas. And on the other side of that too, for anybody that has been asking, I am in the process of also setting up an online store for that. More than likely, it will be set up through Etsy. But as soon as I have some more information on that one, I will let you guys know on the show, and of course, put the link down in the show description, all that kind of fun stuff. But kind of leewaying into the next thing, and this is going to be a little bit out of order than it usually is. But Orin, why don't you let them know what else they can do?
So you guys know the drill at this point. Be sure to submit questions for our most of the time. Well, I guess used to be, not most of the time.
Only when it gets explicted is it a Patreon
only
exclusive?
After dark.
Only after dark.
A Patreon exclusive mini show that is now on YouTube. So anyway, we're going to start that over. Our now on YouTube most of the time mini show, Bizarre Inquiries. Submit questions. It doesn't have to be a question. It can be a clip. It can be a video. It can be just something weird and off the wall that you guys want us to talk about. You can ask us what our favorite movies and our favorite comic books and our favorite rock bands are. We'll talk about that too. Whatever you guys want us to inquire about, just shoot us those questions and we will do it.
And I know we haven't dropped an episode of that in a couple weeks. It's just because of the events and everything. So hopefully maybe next week, following week, we should get back into the role of Bizarre Inquiry. So everybody that enjoys that show will be back in the regular rotation coming here very, very soon. And moving into some other stuff, just a quick message. This podcast has a strong focus on community engagement, so I encourage all listeners to share their own experiences. And if you would like to share your experiences, you guys can either email me at ommencounterreports@outlook.com. You guys can type out those experiences, or you guys can record yourself and send that as a vocal recording to that email. Or to make it a little bit easier for you guys, as I've been mentioning in the last few shows, I also now have set up a hotline number. So with that hotline number, you guys can call in. You guys can leave a voicemail, which I could use on the show, or you guys can even text that number. That's definitely a viable option too. Just let me know what you want to do with it. If you want to share it on the show, just let me know. If not, that's totally okay. If you just want somebody to talk to about this stuff, or you possibly want somebody to come out and investigate, and you don't want to talk about it on the show whatsoever, just let me know. And if I'm not in the area, I may also be able to link you up some investigators that may be in your area. But if you guys want to call that number is 313-364-1551.
And all of this shit we've mentioned is in the link tree in the show description.
Please welcome to the show, Larry Beans Baxter from Alasquatch. How's it going today, man?
Living the dream.
Seems like living the dream in Alaska as usual, right? You got some sunlight today, you mentioned.
Yeah. It's actually a little warmer than I would like. People think of Alaska and they think like, oh, it's cold, but I live in the southern Kenai Peninsula, it's a little warmer than the rest of Alaska. So our winters can be ruined by warm weather because we get a little snow. And then like today, it's like 38, 39 degrees. And then it rained. Now there's like freezing rain on top of the snow. And it's just terrible. I wish it would just stay cold. I wish it would just stay like 20 degrees from Halloween to like May the 1st and then get to 60 degrees.
Dude, we've been having some weird weather in Michigan too. Obviously like warmer than like where you're at and stuff. But normally like in Michigan, it's usually around like 40, 50 degrees around this time. We've had days it's been like 75, almost 80 degrees. And it's like November in Michigan.
80 degrees in New York the other day.
Yeah, it's weird. Like I've never experienced this level of warmth like this late in the year before, like even in Michigan.
It's an El Nino year, I guess. Whatever that means.
Or weather control.
For the
Nino. So, Larry, thank you again for coming on the show. We actually, as we were talking about before we started recording, we crossed paths a little bit at Small Town Monsters this year. But why don't you tell all of our listeners a little bit about yourself and kind of some of the cool work that you're doing, if you don't mind?
Well, I live in Alaska. Was born in Kentucky, actually, and that's kind of what took me to Monster Fest, is the opportunity to get down that way and visit family and do cryptid stuff. But born in Kentucky and joined the military. And I said, I don't care where they send me as long as it's nowhere cold, and straight to Alaska I went. But the joke was on Uncle Sam because I actually like it up here. Ended up staying up here. I've been up here pretty much ever since, and got out of the military, got into law enforcement. Did that for about 20 years, and just recently, here in the last couple of years, I retired, and now I have a podcast called Alasquatch, and I write books. I've written 3 books, and I'm into the cryptid thing, man. Bigfoot's my bag. I really I think there's something to it. And I think if he lives anywhere, he probably lives up here in Alaska. And I hang out, look for Bigfoot and write books. That's what I do.
Sounds like a life to live, man. That sounds good to me. So at least for the Sasquatch stuff, I know a lot of people have gotten into it from, previous experiences or from, just being interested in the stories and stuff. A lot of the time from like police officers, they'll end up getting interested because they'll get these like weird reports and stuff. But at least for you, like where did it all kind of start for you? And also, did it kind of transition into some weird experiences when you were in law enforcement?
It's always something I've always been interested in the unexplained and strange things and UFOs and ghosts and stuff like that. But Bigfoot really resonated with me, especially like living in Alaska. And I grew up, across the street from a library. I read a lot. I was a reader. My favorite part of the library was the Time Life, like Strange Universe books or whatever. I don't remember what they were called, but those and
they're the ones, the all black covers with the little thing on that.
Yeah.
I actually have one sitting up here that I found at a library the other day for 50 cents. It was one on the occult.
Yep. Those and like the Crestwood Monster Series books and stuff like that. I just grew up, and then, of course, with Unsolved Mysteries and In Search Of and all that kind of stuff. It just really got ingrained into me at an early age and I'm naturally curious. And so, yeah, I just dove into it, and I love to read about it. And then once I got up here to Alaska, I was like, man, this would be a great place to look for Bigfoot. And it just kind of happened, kind of organically, kind of naturally, just where I was like, I like this stuff. It might be around here. Let me go look. And that's it kind of just happened. I didn't like go out and be like, I'm going to be a Bigfooter, and I'm going to I'm going to have a podcast and a YouTube page or channel and all this stuff. It just kind of like organically happened. I didn't like set out to once I retire, I'm going to do this and do that. It just happened. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting place to do this kind of thing. And it gives me a perspective that not a lot of people have into looking for cryptids and stuff like that. And I'm a little bit more grounded than a lot of researchers. There's a lot of woo stuff out there and other things, that people get into. And I think I'm very grounded. Being a police officer and dealing with evidence and stuff like that, and having to prove cases in a court of law, it's kind of given me a more like grounded approach to things, I think. And, I'm not saying that there's not ghosts and weird stuff that happens, but, to like Adam Davies says, I think extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And if you don't have something to produce, then, it's a really cool story.
I mean, I make this argument all the time on the show. It's good to be skeptical when you're in this field of research, because otherwise every single bump you hear is going to be a Sasquatch. Every single, noise you hear off in the distance is going to be a ghost or something like that. So it's like, for me at least, the way that I go about research, and I think is probably one of the best ways to go about it, is you have to have that skeptical mind coming into it, where you have to look for every single thing that could possibly be whatever the noise was you heard. And once you get to a point where it can't be explained by anything else, that's when you can start saying, maybe I have something. But, a lot of people go into it, they'll hit a bump and they'll just say that's what it is and not actually put too much thought into it. And in all fairness, it's like, it's maybe entertaining for the person doing the research, but the research isn't going to get anywhere if you're just going to throw a title on every single thing that happens. It's like you have to weed out all of the stuff that more than likely isn't anything if you want to actually get somewhere solid with the research and actually maybe find something.
Yeah, there's some pretty cringy stuff out there, man. Like you'll be watching something and there'll be like a snap in the distance, and somebody's like, "Oh, that's that's Grok the Daywalker," or something like that. They've given them names and backstories, and they're buddies, and it's like that was a snap in the woods, man. Like if you want me to believe in Grok, you're gonna have to show me a little bit more, So yeah, there's some pretty like cringy stuff out there, and a lot of it, it gives the subject a bad name, and it keeps I think a lot of credible people away. Look at Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is the best friend Bigfoot never had. Look at where he's at now. I mean, look at where he's at now. Look at the audience he has. And at one time, he was into Bigfoot. He did a show about Bigfoot. And the people he encountered, I'm not sure exactly who all was involved in that, but the people he encountered were so cringe, so out there that he's talking about interdimensional time traveling space aliens. But if you mention Bigfoot, you're crazy. You're out of your mind.
All right, y'all, we got to take a break and pay some bills. But if y'all want to stay up to date with the show, check us out on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and Discord. Just do all the internet things. And now back to the show.
I didn't even know that Bigfoot got ruined for Joe Rogan. Like, I had no idea about that.
Yeah. He's had Dr. Meldrum on. He's had Bobo on. He just had Bob Gimlin, not Patterson Gimlin, Bob Gimlin, but the YouTuber but they didn't talk about Bigfoot. They talked about everything but Bigfoot. But yeah, I mean, he was really into it. And imagine if we had that platform today and he was still into that, imagine, which is it might actually be a good thing. But, I mean, I call him the best friend Bigfoot never had, because he at one time was into it. And then the subject just got so ruined for him. It's just, he thinks it's preposterous, but yeah, he'll entertain all this other like interdimensional time travel, all this other like weird stuff. But Bigfoot is a bridge too far. This undiscovered North American ape, that's too much.
Well, like you were saying, I think a lot of those like expedition Bigfoot type shows have done much more harm than they have good for not just Bigfoot, but cryptozoology and just, high strangeness as a whole. But, something me and my girlfriend were talking about the other day is, a lot of the people that like Rogan has come on, you can agree with them or not agree with them, but I think he's at the end of the day done a lot of good as far as just getting people to question things and look at things with a skeptical mind. And maybe, there could be these stranger things going on. So it's kind of funny that, what is most people's gateway into this sort of thing, because it's much easier to believe a big ape in the woods than a lot of this stuff. That's kind of his verboten zone.
Yeah. It's, can we swear on here?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Yeah. His thing is, he goes, all these people that are into Bigfoot, they're all, it's like, you better swallow that before I say this. They're all, because you're going to do a spit take. He goes, they're all unfuckable white guys.
Maybe.
And, I mean, I don't necessarily take offense to that, but I mean, that's just like, that's where his experience led him. And honestly, I don't blame him.
Well, I know just, from going to conventions and stuff, like me and Shayn we've run across some kind of questionable people, and we've run across some really cool people like yourself. And, you're going to have a mix in any subject you're talking about, any hobby. I mean, I don't care if it's model trains or whatever, but it just seems like when you mix this high strangeness element in there, like,
you're gonna get high strangeness with the people.
Yeah, one weirdo just kind of, one bad apple ruins it for the whole bunch. At that point, it doesn't matter how good some people's research is. Like you mentioned Jeff Meldrum, who's like a true to foil like scientist, and yourself, who has a background in law enforcement, very credible, researcher. I mean, so yeah, the Bobos of the world kind of ruin it for everybody, I think.
Yeah. Well, Bobo is not as, I mean, I think he does believe maybe some further, some far out there stuff, but he's not quite he's more intelligent than the Finding Bigfoot show like portrayed him as. He's actually a pretty smart dude. But I don't agree with everything everybody says. I think Cliff, is very grounded, very level headed. And again, I don't agree with everything that Cliff says. But
I think it's producers that sometimes get in the way, though, because it's like not even necessarily the people on the show, but the producer saying, if you want another episode, you want another season, you got to entertain people. You got to have something happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've experienced too, like where you do, I mean, when you film, if you film a 10-minute segment for television, you film for hours and then they take, you know, what they need and they put it together and they can like twist your words into whatever they want them to be, really. I mean, and they'll just ask you question after question after question, and they might ask you a question like, "Hey, you know, do you think that it's possible for Bigfoot to exist?" And you're like, "Absolutely, I think they're out there, and I think they exist." And then when it's on TV, they're like, "Hey, do you think the flying spaghetti monster might actually exist?" And you're like, "Absolutely, I think he does exist." So, you know, it is what it is. And let me ask you guys this. Let me ask you guys a question. Do you think there is a downturn right now, not in quality, but in quantity of cryptid entertainment? Because it seems like there's not as many shows out there as there used to be, and there's not any new shows coming out.
I think that's something universal with podcasts that I think a lot of people started up during the whole thing that happened a couple of years ago. I don't want to say it on the show because you get flagged for stupid shit like that, but everybody started up their podcast and they're at home, and I think it's just a matter of like people are starting to not question stuff so more anymore because they're just getting back into the flow of the grind and just trying to like, you know, essentially like just pay for things. So I think it's pulling people's minds away from thinking outside the box because they're too focused now on like the tangible, whatever's going on in front of them kind of a thing.
I mean, television, like network.
Oh, yeah.
Shows.
Yeah, I've noticed that there's definitely like a down spike on that too. But on the other side, though, it might also be because I think a lot of people that like the shows that are established in podcasts are definitely established. And I think when people are looking for stuff in this field now, instead of looking on History Channel, Discovery Channel, like they turn to the podcasters and stuff. And the podcasters that have been around, they have their following. Like they're there. They're not going anywhere. So I think it's also harder for new shows to break in because that new show breaking period's kind of over, and now it's like whatever's established is established, and that's what people are sticking and gravitating towards. So nothing new is like popping up, you know. And the people that weren't going somewhere with it kind of just gave up on it.
My opinion on it is Hollywood is they're not proactive, they're reactive. And when something pops, they're like you know. And right now, like here in the next couple of years, instead of new cryptid shows, you're going to be seeing a ton of true crime shows.
Yep. And Alien. Because Alien stuff keeps popping back up too.
And that's where it's going. Because I was having a conversation with my buddies the other day, and I was telling them, I was like, man, I think Bigfoot is getting ready to, it's going to fall into the background just a little bit. You know, it's going to be overshadowed by this true crime stuff. And there was an article in some mainstream news thing about Bigfoot or something, and he's like, "Hey, Bigfoot's back, you know, Bigfoot's back." And I'm like, "It's Halloween, dude. Like, it always like spikes around October, and then it's gonna die back down." So,
well, it's kind of funny because this is something we've talked about on the show too, and kind of piggybacking off what I said earlier about how Bigfoot is a lot of people's kind of gateway into all of this type stuff. It seems like even in the cryptid world, like things are very secular, like dogman has been a big thing for the past couple years. And, you know, prior to 2 years ago, I had heard like dogman, but wasn't that familiar with it. And it seemed like overnight dogman was everywhere. And that's what everybody was talking about. So, you know, Shayn, you were talking about that thing that happened a few years ago. I wonder if at the same time, you know, when people were at home and had time to research and look into things on their own, once you go down that rabbit hole, you kind of go deeper than Bigfoot very quickly. So I wonder if like a lot of people have gone deeper and their interests are being more spread out than say just aliens, just Bigfoot. So just kind of a random thought I had.
I mean, even with Bigfoot too, I think it's one of those things that like, it's kind of like trying to find like a good analogy for it. Like people get into something and that's enough. But like once they've been doing it for a minute, they need something more. Like it's just that grasp for always looking for something more, something more. So I think a lot of people will like come in with Bigfoot, and then once they kind of feel like they've gotten to a point where it's like, all right, you know, it could be this, but there's not really new theories really popping up on it. Then people move on to the next thing. And wherever people are putting their mind and focus in, there's new theories getting created. So that's where the attention's going. And I think it kind of goes in cycles, you know, that Bigfoot may have been like the doorway back in after everything with, these podcasts and everything becoming more popular. But then people kind of are starting to grow away from Bigfoot because they want to hear weirder and weirder and weirder stuff. But I think eventually when we cycle back again to like Bigfoot as like a community and stuff, when people started throwing out like new theories, when like new stuff starts coming out, then maybe it'll kind of come back into the cycle. But the other part too that I was thinking that maybe people are kind of straying away from it a little bit in the community is because of like all of the AI videos. It's like most of the fake AI videos are all Sasquatch footage. So it's like people are having a hard time maybe putting their focus in that because of how much misdirection there is within the community of all these like fake videos and people literally taking like screenshots from movies and trying to post them on pages like they've actually found some real footage on like a trail cam or something. Like I think it's so full of just random stuff. People are just having a hard time finding what's the truth.
Yeah, to piggyback one, you're saying Bigfoot's a gateway drug. But,
Absolutely.
Hey, Bigfoot's always going to be my homie. He's always going to be my favorite cryptid personally.
But to your point about the AI stuff, I think when the AI stuff, I did a couple of videos about it or a couple of podcasts about it where I was like, this is going to suck. It's going to, like AI is just going to like permeate the subject. Well, I've actually noticed recently a very, I would call a positive effect of AI videos. And that, what you said, it just triggered my memory. A few days or weeks ago, I don't know, it all runs together. Somebody posted a screenshot, like a literal screenshot from that Sasquatch Sunset movie on in a Bigfoot group. And almost all of the comments were like, oh, that's not real. That's AI. That's AI. Well, it wasn't AI. It was from a movie. It was actually practical effects from the movie. But I was like, this is nice. It's making people be more skeptical. Which I think the subject needs a little bit, I think it would benefit from that. And it really surprised me. I was like, man, here I was. I thought AI was going to cause just like mass, like that's everything is Bigfoot now. Like, look at that Bigfoot. He's got 8 fingers and this Bigfoot is, feet are on backwards and all this stuff. And, but that's Bigfoot. And actually, I think it's actually caused a positive unintended side effect of people becoming a little bit more skeptical.
I mean, on the other side too, just having programs now that are AI that you can just run it through and it can catch if there's video editing too. So, I mean, the average person finds a video, they can run it through one of these AI readers and they can go, oh, caught the lines. This is altered footage. So,
right.
Blessing and a curse at the same time. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Warren.
No, you're good. I was just going to say, I think that's kind of funny that you mentioned that because prior to the AI boom a couple years ago, on these type of pages, there'd just be a random shadow in a picture and, it'd have the red circle around it. And here it is. And now we've almost gone to the other extreme. So maybe everything will kind of even out and we'll get to a happy medium at some point.
I think so. And, like you were saying, it comes and goes kind of in cycles almost. And there's almost like little fads in it. Like there for a while, everybody was talking about Bigfoot doing the like spider crawl and like crawling on his fingers and stuff. That was a big thing there for a little while, and it just kind of went away and you didn't hear about it. And then it was the Bigfoot, their skin was like an ashy gray. They had gray skin. Like that was in like almost every report there for a little while. And then that kind of went away. So it's just kind of interesting when you see these fads, or just corroborating details in these sightings. And on the one hand, you're like, that's very interesting how it's very similar to that sighting. But then like a dozen of them, pop up within like 4 or 5 months. And you're like, well, are they just piggybacking off of that? Or is this something that people are actually seeing?
Do you think it's possible? And I'm sure it's one of those situations where more than one thing can be true at the same time. But do you think it's possible that there are obviously some people trying to piggyback and gain attention, but somebody did legitimately see one of these things like the spider crawling or the gray skin, and then maybe that triggers a memory of a sighting or an encounter that somebody else had, and they never put it in that box as far as, oh, this was a Bigfoot encounter. But then when they hear, person X say, I saw this weird thing, then they're like, oh, okay, maybe that's what I saw when I was a kid or something like that. So I wonder if maybe that's a little bit of what's going on as well, where a lot of people don't have a box to put these stranger type sightings in until it's brought to their attention.
Right. I mean, people can only speak to their experiences, right? Like, if you saw a big furry thing like skirting across the ground on all fours, you might, I don't know what that was. And then X amount of years later, you hear somebody talking about a Bigfoot going down and doing that. Well, you might go, oh, you put those puzzles together. And I'm sure that does happen. I'm sure, I'm sure it does happen, and it does occur where people put pieces together and they're like, I think I saw a Bigfoot, like however many years ago or the other day or whenever, they didn't know it was a Bigfoot until they get more information to add to their experience.
Hold on tight, guys. We'll be back with that bizarre stuff you crave. And we are back with the high strangeness. Let's get back into it.
Well, that's something we've talked about with a lot of guests we've had on the show, and not just with Bigfoot, but even with like more paranormal type situations where these people might have had this strange experience, like a sleep paralysis demon type situation or something like that. And they didn't have terminology to explain what happened to them until they heard a podcast or something like that. And someone describing a similar situation in those terms. And, like I said, we've talked to several people that's kind of how they had their awakening, quote unquote, was from hearing somebody else describe the same things that happened to them. So I think kind of bringing it back to our earlier points, I think podcasts are a lot better at fostering community and those sort of questions than Expedition Bigfoot will ever be.
Yeah. There's a lot of positive and a lot of negatives. I mean, at the same, I've said a few times too, like you get to a point where you're like, especially if it's you're getting paid for it, if it's your like means of survival, and you're like, I got to put a show out on Thursday and this is all I got. This is the only guy I got to bring on. I don't think his story's true, but this is a safe place where we can all tell our stories, and it adds some disinformation, I think, to the subject at times.
Yeah, that's true too. I mean, kind of could bring it back to like the dogman thing when we were mentioning the dogman kind of blew up a bit too. I know I've mentioned a few times on the show too, but I think that a lot of the people that are doing Sasquatch research, like if dogman is out there, I think that a lot of these encounters were getting mixed with each other, and we're kind of looking at them as like aggressive Sasquatch encounters and just like Sasquatch encounters. But again, once people had that means of being able to like differentiate it, saying like, oh, this is a dogman versus like this is a Sasquatch, then people started coming forth with more stories. And on the other side, as far as researchers go, there's the people who want to like kind of have a mellow time in the woods, look for Sasquatch. They know that they might get into a situation, but it's a little bit more laid back. And then you have the adrenaline junkie types that are like, yeah, I want to go fight a monster in the woods. So of course, these guys that were Squatch hunters, they want that bigger game. So it's like a lot of these Squatch guys, I think, were hunting dogman this whole time without realizing it. And once they realized that the aggressive one that they were following, that they think they can get these awesome stories and stuff out of, was dogman, they just jumped ship right onto the dogman stuff.
Yeah, I've seen an influx of these special forces guys that are Bigfoot hunters dogman hunters. And it kind of, you can't hunt Bigfoot. Bigfoot's our forest friend. There's so many people that are anti-kill Bigfoot, but there's no like anti-kill dogman people that I know of that are like, we need to save the dogman. Dogman's our forest friend. So he's a soft target basically for these guys that want to, like go out and G.I. Joe in the woods and they're going to kill the monster. So that's kind of my take on it, is these guys are like, well, we can't, if we go after Bigfoot, we're going to offend a bunch of people. So we gotta go kill Dogman because everybody knows he's bad.
I mean, is that just like in a weird way, like the North American way though? Because you see all those memes and stuff with people talking about like cryptids in Europe, and it's all like the fairies, everything's kind of happy, and then it's like cryptids in the United States, it's all these like dark, evil looking creatures and stuff. I mean, it seems like a lot of this stuff, maybe also reflections of just how people feel about the area. Like Europe was completely basically discovered, so people weren't scared of like these ominous things, as scared, of course, of these ominous things that could be in the woods. Where North America, people think we're overpopulated, but there's still vast areas with absolutely nothing. So there's just a lot more dark, scary kind of feel to the woods. So again, maybe it's a reflection of us as a people with our scare of what we're scared of in the woods. Or again, it's just that North American thing that we're just like, fuck yeah, let's go shoot the monster,
Yeah, I think I don't really have a strong opinion on Dogman. I mean, it's interesting. I don't think there's really the historical record there. I know people will argue and say that there are, but personally, I don't think there's a historical database to look back on and say, yeah, there probably are these dog things running around. Personally, I think probably if they do exist, they're probably some sort of like supernatural thing. I think a lot of dogman and probably Bigfoot sightings can be attributed to the trickster entity. You know, like almost just like every native tribe has a Bigfoot legend, they also have some sort of trickster demon or spirit or something. And I think that if those things exist, then they're like, well, why wouldn't they can take the form of a fox and a bear and a moose and an eagle? Why couldn't they take the form of a Bigfoot too? You know, like let's say there are North American apes out here. Why wouldn't they like look like those as well? So I think a lot of sightings, especially some of the more woo related Bigfoot sightings, could probably be attributed to some kind of trickster entity.
I mean, I've even kind of wondered if some of these dogman things might be more closely related to Sasquatch stuff than we think it is. I mean, even within like humans, you know, how many different types of like humans were there that eventually kind of all blended into the humans that we know as like present day human? But it doesn't mean that like other things that existed, there might not be small pockets of like different diversions from like the genetics that they're kind of getting into. And I mean, even within like apes, you know, there are not just flat faced apes, but apes that have the more canine looking mouth and stuff too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, you know, maybe these things are something that's a little bit more closely related to Sasquatch, where maybe the genetics are different. So we're just kind of going off of what looks the most familiar to us. We're putting this dog view on them and just kind of looking at them like every characteristic of them is dog like, but that's because you already have that notion in your head. But, you know, if you think that maybe they might be some other like subspecies of a Sasquatch type being, and they're just a little bit more aggressive, you know, like maybe that makes a little bit more sense for some people. Cause that's kind of, I definitely adhere to some of the supernatural stuff. Don't get me wrong. Like I find it, I definitely think there's a good possibility to it, but the way I kind of look at things first is I try to look at like the real world version of something first before I get into the supernatural stuff if the real world stuff can't be explained. And Dogman's so up in the air now, people have such like weird experiences with like saying that they vanish and stuff. But on the other side, you know, you hear these people always making reference to like these metallic doors out in the woods and stuff when Dogman comes and stuff. So that's where I kind of get into maybe they're a little bit something more physical than what people give them credit for. Again, maybe a subspecies of Sasquatch, or on the other side, bringing in the metal noise sound. I've also wondered if, considering we were able to like clone sheeps back in the 90s, like who knows where that technology might be today. And I'm not saying they're like mixing like dog genetics with like humans or anything like that. But, you know, if you're able to create some type of Frankenstein chimera type creature by splicing different genetics together, and you create this like vicious animal, you know, a good way of testing it, just let it run free in the woods to eat and see what it does. And then on the other side for like military use, I mean, how hard would it be to drop like 3 of these dogmen things into like a base or into wherever, and they'll just destroy the entire place and there's no tie back to you. You know, like nobody's going to believe these stories of this military base that got taken out by these 3 dogmen. So it's never going to come back on your government that you were the one that sent them in. So it's just a way to drop something to take care of a problem. But I think that might be a good explanation for it, especially with the metallic sounds, is that I think there might be more like military scientific reasoning behind these dogmen beings. And maybe that's why they're so aggressive, is because they're meant to be aggressive.
Well, we were filming Bigfoot Encounters of the Pacific Northwest in Eastern Washington in 2018. And I had an incident where I had separated from the group and I was on this like old logging road, and I had my FLIR out and I was, you know, therming the other side of the road. And I thought I heard, I mean, it was just like a whisper, in my, you know, like kind of behind me somewhere, and I wheel around and there's nothing there, and I'm using my thermal and I'm not seeing anything. And I just got like overcome with this fear, like this overwhelming fear. And I caught back up with the group. We went back to camp. It was our last night there. And I was scared the whole time. I was just like, I felt we were kind of camped, like there was a hill across the street from or not street, but road. It makes me sound like we were like in the middle of town. It was a street, but there was this big hill where like most of the activity that we had experienced while we were there. I mean, it was crazy. There was knocks, howls, screams. I mean, there was stuff going on the whole time we were there, and it was all pretty much coming from up on this hill. And the whole time that night while we're back at camp, I'm sitting there just gripped in this intense fear, and I feel like something is going to come over that hill, like the Zulu Nation, like Bigfoots are going to come over that hill and get us. And one of the guys that was with us, Will Ulmer, he was like, man, something's off, like the vibe is off. And everybody else was just like, all right, we're going to go to bed and, we're going home tomorrow. And nobody else seemed to really like be vibing on it except for us. And we stayed up really late till like 3:00 in the morning. He had a shotgun and I had a pistol, and we were like feeding the fire all night, just kind of like expecting something to happen. And I think it was about 3 a.m. we heard this boom. And it didn't have a crack of a gunshot, but it didn't really sound like the metallic sound either. Like it didn't really sound like a door slamming. It was just almost like a sonic boom, but it didn't sound like it was in the sky. If that makes any sense, it sounded like it was somewhere over that hill. And just like a couple of minutes after it happened, he looks at me and he's like, is it just me or did the vibe change or did the atmosphere change? I don't remember exactly what word he used, but I was like, it was like somebody flipped a switch and I wasn't scared anymore. And I was like, dude, this is like, that's the most unexplainable thing that's ever happened to me in my life. And, I ended up going and getting in my tent and going to sleep. But just from the moment I heard those whispers until the moment we heard that boom, I was just scared and unreasonably so, like I've been in like situations where I was like concerned for my safety and like feared, that I might get hurt or worse. But this was just like it lasted like hours and just would not go away. I can't explain it. I don't know what it was.
Did it feel different from like the normal like apex predator type feeling that people get from like Sasquatch encounters? Or did it feel like heavier and more than that? It was just
it was like this overwhelming sense of dread, and that I wouldn't be able to do anything to stop it.
See, people actually describe that a lot. Not that you saw anything or anything, but people describe that type of feeling a lot with dogman encounters. And again, maybe people kind of see it as woo-woo, but if you look into like the science of it, like the whole like vibration and frequency thing isn't as woo-woo as it sounds when you're actually talking about it. Like different things give off different energies. Like it's not something that's just completely like woo-woo, but if there was some different type of being in the area that was different from like what you're normally used to, of course, it's going to kind of give you like a different feeling. And again, kind of describing, people kind of say the same thing with like dogmen and stuff too. And not that you saw anything, but assumably, like if the whole theory is correct that, possibly the metallic sounds might be them letting them out of like underground bases or whatever they might be, you assumably probably have to wait to call these things back in. So, I mean, maybe that boom may have been some way of calling whatever it was that was making you feel uncomfortable back in. And that's why that feeling went away, is because whatever that thing wasn't in the area anymore because it went back off towards that sound.
Yeah. Well, that was like Will's kind of theory, was like, whatever that was saying like, okay, like show's over, like we're going somewhere else or, basically I think he maybe thought it was another Sasquatch, like maybe an alpha Sasquatch or something, like calling the rest of them back or off. But I mean, it could be what, who knows? It's all speculation, right? It could have been anything, but yeah, I don't know. It could have been a doorway. It could have just been, it could have been an atmospheric thing. It might've been a sonic boom from a plane going over. I don't know. But that was like one of the most unexplainable things that's ever happened to me. I've never really seen like a ghost, or I've seen some weird stuff, but I've never really seen a ghost. But that's usually when people ask me like, what's the weirdest thing that ever happened to you? Like that's the story that comes out.
I mean, it might be more military related than you think too. Cause I mean, assumably, if the military is testing out weird stuff, like they're not gonna be doing it at the bases. Like the best place to probably do it is like in the middle of the woods. So I think a lot of these weird encounters that people have in the woods may be a lot more military based than they think they are. And one of the main ones I always kind of say is the whole Glimmerman thing. Like if you're going to test some type of like bio camouflage suit, why not a better place to do it in the woods where there's minimal people? You can see somebody, you can see if you can kind of come up on them, if they can see you. So it's like, I think that a lot of the time when people have some of these weird encounters in the woods, they may be more like military tests than what people realize.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if, I mean, I'm definitely not saying the military wouldn't test their stuff on like innocent civilians. I wouldn't. I've
not even in a harmful way,
because I've seen a thing or two, But
I mean, testing a biosuit ain't hurt nobody. It's just they're just walking past people. It's stuff like that,
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, who knows like what's, what's out there. Like, I'm not a huge, I used to say like, I'm not a conspiracy guy. But that's the thing too. Like I was a police officer for a long time. I was in the military before that. I was a relatively high rank in my police department. And nobody ever like took me aside and said, look, this is what you do when somebody calls and reports a Bigfoot. Like you tell them this or that. I don't think there's anything like that going on, at least at a municipal level here where I worked. I know, and every time anything like that ever come up around the guys I worked with, it was always like, oh yeah, with the little green man. I mean, it was like so beyond the pale. It was like nobody talked to it. It wasn't real. Nobody like it was. If you mentioned it, you were crazy.
Hold on tight, guys. We're going to take a brief commercial break. But if you guys enjoy the work we do over here and you guys want to support what we do, you guys can do it in one of three ways. You guys can either check out the Patreon, which we do have multiple tiers, all with 7-day free trials available, or you guys can go and check out the Open Minds Media merch store, where we have a lot of awesome designs for the show and a lot of awesome designs for a lot of the stuff that we talk about on the show. And number three, you guys can always go and leave a review or rating for the show on iTunes or Spotify. And of course, if you guys leave a 5-star review, we'll read on the show and give you guys a big shout out. And we are back to the show, so let's hop right in. I mean, the closest thing I've heard to that, not that it's some giant conspiracy or anything, but I've had a few people that, work for DNR and stuff, and they basically say if there's like a Sasquatch sighting in the area, they'll just mark it off like, there was a bear seen in the area, don't camp over here. And I don't know if that's like some grand government cover-up or anything like that, but, I'm assuming that at least from DNR's perspective, they go, okay, somebody reported a Sasquatch. From their perspective, they're saying somebody saw a bear, so they're just going to mark that area off. But, I've heard a few different people work for DNR that say like, oh, when we have a sighting, we mark it off as a different animal. But that just might be because the government's like, or, DNR's not like, oh, it's not a Sasquatch, it's a bear. Just mark it as a bear.
I think it's more of a, we don't recognize the existence of Sasquatch than we're going to cover this up. It's one of the, never attribute to malice that which can be explained by ignorance, that's like my favorite quote, but because there's a lot of people, man, especially working in law enforcement, you hear people tell you things and like, oh man, this happened and that happened because of this. And it's like, no, not the DA dropped the charges because they're extremely overworked. Like nobody, because I would have, bad guys tell me all the time, like, yeah, the cops screwed this up, so the case got dropped. And I would go look, and it would just be like, it was dropped because of the overwhelming amount of cases. Like there was no, and I don't know if if that's them just like in their mind, they're thinking, oh, the cops screwed up, so I'm gonna, I got off, or if it's just like they're trying to make the cops look bad. But 99.9% of the time when something like that happens, it's just basically in the interest of justice. They're like, look, we got too much shit going on. Well, we're just going to make this go away.
Yeah. Bike thief, murderer. Like, let's go after this guy. Like that guy's whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
But I cut you off a little bit ago, Orin. I didn't mean to cut you off. So I mean, if you want to pop in and mention what you're going to mention.
Oh, it's okay. We've moved beyond what I was going to
for sure.
So go ahead. You're good.
Popping back into a little bit about, I want to kind of dive into some of your experiences and stuff. And since you've been talking a little bit about law enforcement and stuff, I'd like to kind of dive into maybe some of the weird reports you've gotten. I mean, whether you believe them or not, I mean, both sides, I guess, you're most ridiculous. And if you've had a report that you legitimately think may have been something that you want to go and check out yourself.
Well, I can't see most of my law enforcement career I spent working in a municipality. So we didn't get like a lot of the like lost hiker calls or anything like that. There wasn't like a ton of missing person calls. Most of our missing person calls was, grandma and grandpa went to Anchorage and they haven't came back yet. They didn't make it back yet. And they were, there was an accident, highway was closed or something like that. And most of them got closed out because the people showed back up. Not really a lot of, people didn't really call. There was a couple of times where people called for some weird things like, there's people on my roof or this or that. But most of the time that was attributed to like meth psychosis or something like that. You get there, you talk to the person and this person is like tweaked out of their mind. And I mean, maybe they're seeing something that I'm not, that's really there. And the whatever chemical they've got flowing through their system is allowing them to see it. but I'm not seeing it. It's not there.
They're seeing demons. That's what all those meth heads usually say is it's demons.
that happened one time where a guy kept calling like, there's somebody on my roof. There's somebody on my roof. And we show up and I'm talking to the guy, and the guy is like if I didn't know anybody, like, I'm like, this guy is telling the 100% truth. And he was, because in his mind, this was really happening. And then at one point, and I'm starting to believe this dude, I'm like, why is there people on this dude's roof at like 3:00 in the morning? And then finally he's like, there's one right now. He's up there now. And I'm like, dude, there's nobody there. Like, he had me there for a little bit. I was like, I think there might actually be something to this. Like, there might've been somebody trying to get in this guy's house. And then he started seeing them while I was there. And I'm like, okay, there's nobody here.
You go up there and it's just a bunch of dudes that peek their head up. He's like, I see one.
No, it was not that. It was a sloped roof, so they couldn't be up there.
And then I guess kind of diving into a little bit, since you're in Alaska, we definitely have to take advantage of some of the Alaska stories. And I know that Sasquatch in Alaska obviously has a different name, a totally different like vibe with that type of Sasquatch. Usually a lot more aggressive from what most people tell of their stories and stuff. But at least while you've been up there, if you want to kind of cover some of the stuff you come across as far as like the Alaskan Sasquatch and exactly like what kind of stuff you experience or get reports about.
Oh man. This year it's been kind of a slow year for Bigfoot reports. I got an older one from a gentleman that thinks he's might have saw one on a weather cam in Alaska of all places, which is a little weird because it's in the Aleutian chain. It's an island and there's not really a lot of reports from out that way. And a lot of people basically will tell you like there's none out there because they're islands. But if you ever read Robert Alley's Raincoat Sasquatch, he talks quite a bit about in that book about aquatic encounters where people will see them swimming between the islands in the southeast part of the state.
I had somebody say that they actually had an encounter a week or two ago. Actually, I was talking to somebody that said that they were watching one bob down and grab crayfish. Like,
yeah. So if they can swim between the islands in the southeast part of the state, I certainly wouldn't say they're not doing it in the Aleutians. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I didn't know what to think about it. I mean, it was an interesting tale. Of course, it's one of those that happened years ago, and there's not really a lot of follow up that can be done on it. But every once in a while, you hear something out of the Aleutians, and again, it's one of those things where I'm like, man, it's just. It doesn't feel like they should be out there, but again, if you've got all these stories of them swimming between islands and stuff, then it can certainly, if they do that, it can certainly happen.
Probably be a good hiding spot too if people aren't there as much. I mean, if they go on one of these islands that people never really come on, I mean, they can just basically chill there and just go to the main shore when they need stuff.
Yeah, and true. And then you are on an island. If a boat pulls up on one side of the island, you just walk over to the other side of the island and swim to another one or something. It's it's not hard to get away. If you can swim.
And I know that last time we were talking about it a little bit. The whole idea that a lot of people have this idea that Alaskan Sasquatch, they're like known for taking Native women, specifically up there. At least from like your research. Do you feel that is as much as the case as what people make it out to be, or do you think it is also just to take into consideration just like Alaska as its own, like just being a really, really harsh climate to live in?
I don't think it's quite as prevalent as people make it out to be, but I think it does probably occur. It does probably happen, or at least it has happened in the past. I mean, they got that reputation for a reason, right? Mm-hmm. Here on the Kenai Peninsula, there's several names for Bigfoot and different kind of Bigfoot-ish entities. And the Dena'ina people have the Nantana, which from what I've understood, Nantana is basically means the ones that steal us. So I mean that's they're basically named after kidnapping people and taking people. And it happens, a lot up north too. You hear about it with, the Yupik people, where they're very particular about, like don't let your women and children out or go past the village, or out of the village after dark and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. There's one of my favorite Alaskan Bigfoot stories is of the two sisters that were on snowmobile. And the snow machine up here, he said snowmobile. They were on a snow machine, and basically one of these things, they were traveling between villages, and one of these things like chased them and almost caught up to them. And what was at one point in the story, they stop and they're like looking, and this thing is like on a hill, and it's like kind of like it's either waving at them or motioning them to come toward them, and it's like what is the purpose of that? That sounds pretty nefarious. He probably wasn't like, come over here and I'll give you like food.
We got candy.
Yeah. And then the Sasquatch is standing on the hill with a sign that says free candy, and and then he chased them for quite a while in the snow machine, almost caught up with them. So that kind of points to we'll never know what would have happened if he had caught him, but it sounds pretty damn nefarious.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a lot, but then there's a lot of people missing Alaska, and I think a lot of that gets attributed to Bigfoot or cryptids or some nefarious thing. But the truth is like there's so much up here that can kill you, but without ever thinking about Bigfoot, without ever bringing Bigfoot or cryptids or anything into the equation. If it gets cold enough, I get locked out of my house, I'm gonna die. It's just a fact of life up here. And I think a lot of times people look at some of those missing persons numbers and mysterious deaths, and it's hard for them to comprehend that, man, it's a hard place to live, and there's got to be something going on. It's got to be something that's killing people and taking people. And honestly, I think it does happen. I'm sure, I kind of look at Sasquatch like I do bear. If you're in the right place at the right time and you interrupt their hunt or food source or threaten their young, or maybe they see you as a threat to their territory, yeah, something bad might happen. But for the most part, they're probably going to leave you alone, just like a bear does. Mm-hmm. I had a tense encounter with a bear here. I think it was last month on my porch. He was a big old fat black bear. He was getting ready to go to bed for the winter, and he was just looking to get every scrap of calorie that he could. And he was up here trying to lick the soot off my grill, and I was trying to run him away, and I kind of made a mistake because I opened the back door, and I've got my shotgun, and I'm like, get out of here, bear, get out of here. And I'm like between him and the exit, and I'm like, well, this is not a good place to be. So I step back inside, and he walks past, and he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him through the door as he walks past. And I was like, man, if he just like gave that, which it's got glass, he could just pop right through there if he wanted to. But he just wanted to lick my grill, and he didn't want none. So we parted ways amicably. But yeah, I think the same thing could happen with a Bigfoot. You're just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he's in a bad mood, or you're threatening his food or young. And I think probably there are people that have gone missing and run afoul of Sasquatch. Probably not as many as the internet would have you believe, but I think it definitely does happen. I mean, they have that reputation for a reason.
I mean, it's definitely one of those things too, where I think that like Native women specifically, it seems like they're one of those ones that people like look for, but for like not too long. So it's maybe just a way that people can just kind of put it into this category. And then the people that are from the families that are affected, they have an easier time saying that somebody got taken by a Sasquatch in their head than thinking that maybe, somebody that was a person that they may know that's in their community may have like kidnapped or done something to their significant other, or, even just being out in the woods, knowing that they passed away in the woods. Like maybe it's like easier for some people to accept, just to kind of put that connotation that like a creature got them or something like that. But
yeah, well, you're 100% right, man. And I dealt with a lot of suicides when I was working, and that was something that I noticed after a while is just people have a really hard time accepting suicide. Mm-hmm. I mean, it could be the most clean cut suicide you've ever seen. The guy was in a locked room, he had the key in his pocket. He wrote a note and unalived himself. And the people were like, nope, this was definitely foul play. He would never do that. He, my loved one would never, leave me or put me in this position or whatever. And I think to your point, Shayn, that's a lot of the same with people that go missing. Like it's not their fault. Something nefarious happened.
It's easier for people to digest. And I mean, even on the other side too, kind of getting a little bit more into like the Sasquatchy side of stuff too. Most people describe their physical features as looking very native, and when you get into the whole genetic stuff, like the biggest theory is basically that there's the unknown male DNA with the female human DNA. So, I mean, if these things were potentially like taking females, breeding with them, I've even heard stories that there was like trading back and forth between like the natives and like Sasquatch and stuff. There's different stories of that. If they kind of adapted over time that breeding with Native American women almost became part of their culture, then maybe it's something that kind of gets carried on. And if some of these Native American females are going missing due to Sasquatch, maybe it's a matter of they're particularly looking for them subconsciously because they know that they're going to like almost keep the DNA clean, or they're going to keep looking at the way they're going to look. But as soon as they start bringing in other race genetics, then maybe Sasquatch is going to start taking on different characteristics, because 99.9 of the experiences that you hear about where people see their faces directly, they're always described as having very native faces.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. But while we're on commercial break, if you guys don't mind checking out the sponsors of the show, I Know Squatch, Cryptotheology, Snarly Owl Natural Products, Oregon-ite, Dimension Devices, and Big Ape Threads, all information and discounts are available in the show description. Now back to the show.
There's another story. I believe it's a Yupik story of a woman that got taken, and they took her to a cave. The Sasquatch took her to a cave, and there was other Sasquatch in the cave, and one of them obviously was not doing well. He was kind of sick, and she somehow or another they relayed to her through like pantomiming and stuff. She figured out that they wanted her to help the sick Sasquatch. So she was kind of a medicine woman, and she did what she could. And the Sasquatch eventually, after, I don't know how long, I can't remember how long she was there. I get the feeling it was a couple of weeks or something, or maybe a week. And eventually the Sasquatch got to doing better, and they took her back home basically, and dropped her off outside of her village. That's one of the little bit more unusual stories. But again, it's one of those where they took somebody, but not necessarily for nefarious purposes, and then they brought them back. And every once in a while you get something like that.
That's pretty crazy. Because I'm from North Carolina, so not too far from Kentucky where you grew up, but we've done a couple episodes on like native folklore in the North Carolina area, and
there was two of them we covered that were very close.
It seems like this motif of these, they don't call them Sasquatch, of course, but these like wild men, or one of them's called the Boojum type creatures would, abduct or mate, or in some cases marry these local women. And one story in particular, they took her to a cave where the other Sasquatch were. So I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that story in particular, because it hits a lot of hallmarks of things that we've talked about, on the other side of the world, basically. And it's funny that these same things keep popping up time and time again. So it seems to me either there's something to it with these creatures, or this is some kind of subconscious thing that people are, putting on this phenomenon.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's so compelling to me, is just how you have so many similarities across North America, and they're so similar, and different tribes with different languages and different customs, and they all have similar stories, but not identical. Like some tribes, will say they're like godless killing machines. Some tribes will say they're the guardians of the forest. Some say that they're just another tribe of people. They have a lot of different opinions of them. I say the Native Americans, they don't know more about Sasquatch than everybody else, but they have more awareness of them.
I mean, on the other side of it too, I mean, if these things are intelligent, they might just be playing to their strengths, meaning that these things are really good at surviving in the woods, collecting food and stuff like that. They know that humans are good at healing. Like they've seen like a human break their leg, and then a couple months later they see that person walking. So, maybe it's like a matter of like, they go, okay, this human's more intelligent than us. It's kind of like that whole concept of like, the lion that has like the thorn in its foot. Yeah. It's like that thing's a vicious beast, but as soon as that human pulls that out, it's like, thank you. And then all of a sudden it becomes a baby for that thing. And it might be the same with like Sasquatch and stuff, that maybe they kind of kept their distance, but then with these certain tribes, it was like they got to that situation. They're like, all right, we need your help. So then after that, it almost kind of formed somewhat of like an understanding where maybe they don't necessarily like hang out with each other or have festivals together, but it was more like a mutual thing that it was like, all right, this is your area, this is our area. You know, if you need help, you know, you'll hear about these offerings sometimes where Sasquatch will leave like deer and stuff like that out for people. Like maybe it's this kind of mutual trade back and forth without direct communication kind of a thing where it's like, you know, they'll give you gifts, but on the other side, if one of them gets hurt, they might take a female for a little bit to see if they can help them, and then they'll bring him back, and then they'll give, you know, that tribe food. It's like, you've heard a bunch of stories of that too.
Yeah, the Athabascan people, they have a story of I believe they're called Tornets. I may be mispronouncing that, which were kind of Sasquatch-like, but they had tails. They weren't. I wouldn't go so far as to call them Sasquatch, but
still kind of fits in the ape category with the tails, though. Still,
yeah, they had a relationship with the Tornets where they basically lived in peace, traded. You know, they didn't bother each other, and there was an incident where the Tornets stole a canoe or damaged a canoe or something with a canoe in the Tornet, and that caused the Athabascans and the Tornets to basically go to be at odds with each other, and I think the story is the natives wiped the Tornets out. But occasionally you hear stories like that where they were, you know, maybe they were a little benevolent, or they just were, you know, they didn't bother them, or they traded a little bit. You know, it makes me think sometimes, every once in a while, when you hear these stories of these people that were lost and they get found or they get brought back, especially the little boy there. I think, was that in South Carolina, or am I thinking North Carolina? So
we did an episode on, if you're talking about Dennis Martin, that's kind of the most famous case.
It was the little boy that got stuck in the woods.
Was he the one that he came back and said that like 8 men took care of him and stuff like that, and that's how he came back?
It was a bear.
A bear, yes.
A bear, yeah. And I think, you know, you hear stories like that where somebody got taken care of, or maybe they got hurt or passed out in the woods, and then all of a sudden they wake up and they're like at the trailhead, or they're near rescue. And sometimes when stuff like that happens, I'm like, man, are they smart enough to know, like, if this freaking kid dies, these woods are going to be crawling with people. We got to take him back. You know, we got to like get him back to his people, so they'll leave us the hell alone. Or, you know, this hiker or what, you know, fill in the blank. So sometimes I wonder about that. If they're smart enough to know, like, man, the last time some dude died out here, there were humans running around for 3 or 4 days. We got to get him back to his people. Well, and especially some of the missing 411 stuff where they search an area, they don't find it, and then all of a sudden there's a body or something there. I mean, maybe not necessarily. I'm not saying the Bigfoot hurt them, but that might be the Bigfoot being like, get him back to his people, so they'll leave us.
Yeah, we found him. Leave him somewhere.
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I was going to piggyback off of. And, you know, on the show, as we kind of wrap up, I think this is a good point to kind of hit on. We talk all the time about, you know, issues of language, and in a lot of these cases, people are using the best language they have to describe an indescribable thing. And a lot of these like missing 411 cases, especially involving children, well, they'll come back and say, oh, a bear took care of me, and we picked berries with the bear, and like things that we know bears can't physically do. You know, it gets back to this idea of language. These children are describing the experience they had with probably these Sasquatch type beings with the best language they have.
Absolutely.
On the other side too, I mean, I think it's one of those things that if Sasquatch has an intelligence factor to it, which of course it seems to, you know, assumably they're going to be capable of feeling emotions towards other things. I mean, you know, you'll hear these like stories about like just like a dog or something that gets like abandoned in the woods, and the next thing you know, like a group of this other animal is taking care of it, or, you know, a dog gets abandoned in the woods, and then all of a sudden it's living with like a pack full of bears and stuff like that. Like, I think it's just within animals, there's the thing that it doesn't necessarily want to hurt other things. It's, unless it's hunting and it's an apex predator, like it doesn't have the intention that it just wants to kill things just for the sake of doing it, especially when the intelligence factor comes in. So, you know, if you come into this thing's house, of course it's going to scare you out of its house. Every animal is territorial. Even the kindest person, you go into their house unexpected, and you're going to get a word from them, or you're going to get greeted with a shotgun shell. But, you know, on the other side of it, it's like, you know, if a kid comes into your house and the kid's hurt, you know, of course you're going to end up helping that kid. it's not that you're always aggressive. It's just time and situation where, you know, if people are out in the woods, they're whooping, they're hollering, which may piss them off for all we know, even though we're looking at it as a way to call them in. You know, you're riling them up, and then you have these encounters with them, and then you have this bad connotation of them. But more than likely, like, these things are just these intelligent beings that are out in the woods that just want to get left alone. At the end of the day, they're not out here trying to hurt people. It's just they want to scare people away from their territory. And, you know, if somebody needs help, they're going to help them. It's just the aggression aspect comes from strictly just they don't want you in their territory unexpected.
Yeah. Well, have we got a couple more minutes? I want to.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard. There's a guy out there called Lieutenant Grossman, and he wrote a book that's really popular there for a while. It was like all the rage among military and police, called On Killing, and it basically talks about how it starts off talking about how, like, during times of war, like World War I, World War II. When they went back and they polled a lot of these soldiers, talked to a lot of these soldiers, you know, only a small percentage of them were actually like trying to actively kill the enemy. Like, a lot of them were, they're just shooting over in that direction. Maybe they hit somebody, maybe they didn't, but they weren't like aiming at people. And they found that a lot of the deaths in battle were actually attributed to a small number of, you know, like people. So basically you might have a platoon of like, or a company squad of like 10 people, and there's only like maybe one or two of the guys on there are like really bloodthirsty. Like, we're going to kill as many of these guys as we can. And they said that it's natural for a lot of species to have aversions to killing their own. If you look at a lot of animals in the wild, most of the time, you know, like when they're fighting for mates or food or something like that, they will try and just drive them off. You know, there's not a lot of actual murder. Sometimes it happens. And sometimes you'll see animals kill other animals' offspring. Like, that's not my kid. So the bears do that a lot. You know, they'll kill other bears' cubs, but not their own. And he had this theory that, you know, like most animals and people, they don't want to kill each other. Like, it's just an ingrained thing. You know, you do have outliers of, you know, psychopaths and sociopaths that will, but for the most part, most people, unless absolutely pushed to absolute limit, will not murder. And it's pretty much the same in the animal kingdom too, where they'll kill other animals, prey animals, obviously, but they won't kill each other. And I wonder about that and Bigfoot, because how many stories have you heard with a hunter? Like, I had it in my sights, but it looked too human. I didn't shoot it. How many times has that been flipped? Where a Bigfoot is like, I don't know, man, that kind of looks like one of us. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna mess with it.
Especially a kid too, when they're really small, it's like there's no danger to them. Like, they could pick it up and throw it versus like an adult that's sitting there with a rifle. Like, I'm sure that they're intelligent enough to sense the danger and know that the kid, even if he came up and started trying to like attack them, isn't realistically going to do any damage to them.
Yeah.
So they got a little bit more leeway.
So yeah, I think about stuff like that sometimes and how it like translates over. You know, a lot of the stuff that I encountered during my law enforcement career, a lot of the training and investigations and stuff, like almost directly transfers over to you know, cryptid investigation. And that's one of the things I think about a lot with, especially when it comes to like violent Bigfoot encounters and stuff like that, is, you know, we look enough alike that I think there's probably a natural version on both sides to that we don't want to hurt each other. I mean, I think it does happen. Obviously it does happen, but I think it doesn't happen as much as a lot of the internet would have us believe.
True.
All right, y'all, last ad break for today's episode. And now back to the show.
And I guess kind of starting to wrap up towards the end now too. We didn't really get too much of a chance to like be able to really get into your books or spotlight your books a little bit. So before we start closing out, just for the sake of self-advertising and stuff, if you want to let people know about your 3 books, what they're about, what they're going to find, and where they can find them at, you know, kind of give them a quick run over your books.
Yeah, I've got Squatch Cop, investigating and documenting the Bigfoot phenomenon, which is kind of it's almost like a how-to book. If you want to get into investigating Bigfoot, and like there's a lot of books out there will tell you, or a lot of YouTube series out there will tell you how to look for Bigfoot, but there's not much out there that will tell you what to do when you find something. So this is it's more about how to document evidence because there's not and do it basically in a way that a law enforcement investigator would do it.
Okay.
And then I have Justice Morale and Other Fairy Tales, Alaskan Cop Stories. This is just a collection of short. Some of them are kind of funny. Some of them are kind of sad. Cop stories from when I was working here in Alaska. And then
if you want, just to take a little quick side tangent, just for the sake of it, if you have one funny one that you remember off the top of your head, if you want to share one of the funny ones from that book.
Oh, geez. I have, let's see. I think it was the same one I told you the last time we talked about. I'm driving around one day on patrol and I see this car coming towards me. It's an old decommissioned taxi cab. It's a canary yellow Crown Vic. And it's coming towards me, and I look, and I recognize the kid that's driving it, like he's a regular to us. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure, we'll call him Bill. Like, I'm pretty sure Bill doesn't have a driver's license. So I get on the radio, and I'm like, hey, does Bill have a driver's license? And dispatch is like, Bill does not have a driver's license. So I turn around, I pull him over, and I'm like, Bill, you're not supposed to be driving. And I almost kind of felt bad for him. He's like, I know, I'm not supposed to be driving. And so I'm writing him his ticket, or no, I think back then we could actually arrest him for driving without a license. You can't anymore, or you couldn't when I retired. So I kind of felt bad for him, so I thought I'd give him a little bit of advice, and I said, son, you're not exactly inconspicuous driving around in that big yellow car. And he goes, officer, I swear I wasn't trying to be inconspicuous. Yeah, there's all kinds of funny stuff like that. One time I was working in a jail, and these two inmates were talking in the hallway, and they're like, I'll give you my whatever ramen noodles for your like whatever. And I didn't care. Like they weren't supposed to be bartering. They weren't supposed to be trading. And I didn't care if they did or not, but I didn't want them to do it in front of me blatantly, like I wanted some plausible deniability. So I walk by them and I'm like, hey guys, maybe don't do that in the hallway. I don't want to have to write you guys up for bartering. And he goes, no, we were just trading.
It's completely different.
It's different wording, right?
And I'm like, hold on, guys. I'm going to go get the dictionary and we're going to have a little chat. So, but yeah, I mean, a lot of funny stuff like that. Oh, geez. Oh, I had, this was one of the creepier ones is I was driving around one night. It was kind of raining, kind of a crappy night. I'm going up this hill and I see something in the middle of the road and I start to slow down and I'm like, oh my God, is there a little kid in the road? Like, what is that? It's dark, it's night, it's rainy, it's crappy. And I start to slow down and I'm getting closer and then I see it and I'm like, oh my God, this is an alien. Like it looked like a gray, like alien.
It's a Dover demon.
With the big eyes. It's like 3.5 feet tall. I mean, it's like, I can see it over the hood of my Crown Vic. And I'm, of course I know, like I'm into this stuff. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm about to get abducted. Like this is it. It's happening. Like, are they going to bring me back here? Like, I'm like freaking out. Like, can I run over it? Like, I'm like going through all these scenarios in my head. Like, is the car going to die? And I mean, I'm just like, I don't know what to do. And then all of a sudden these wings just come out and this thing takes off and it flies over the top of my car. And it was like, I think they're great northern owls. But it was like almost 4 feet tall. It was the biggest owl I've ever seen in my life. I've probably never seen another one, but it scared the crap out of me.
Dude, owls
What's so funny about, oh, go ahead, Shane.
No, go ahead. Or sorry. I was just saying owls are huge, dude. People don't realize how big those things are.
I was just going to say, we've hit a lot of the big cryptids on the show at this point. Mothman and Flatwoods and the Hopkinsville goblins, and like owls are always, the explanation for that. So that's kind of funny that you bring it back to, hey, you saw an owl and you thought it was this weird, crazy thing. So
I grew up like 45 minutes away from Hopkinsville.
That's awesome. That's one of our favorite stories here on the show.
Yeah, because we dive into the underground stuff.
I really, it's not owls. Like there's no, like no what way. The hell? Yeah, what the hell was it? The only thing that like kind of gives me pause about that story is how it almost has, you have the textbook, like he went outside, he saw the light in the sky, he saw the thing coming down. And then it's like, there's always like that like qualifying, like, oh, they were little green men because he saw the light in the sky. Like, it's always that like little bit of extra information that kind of explains where these things come from. Like, wouldn't it just be, how freaking weirder would it be if they were just sitting around the house and those things just showed up and there was no like meteor or craft or light seen in the sky? So that's the only thing that kind of gets me a little bit. Kind of like with the Osterman story, Albert Ostman, where he's like, he's got all his stuff in his sleeping bag, like everything he needs is in a sleeping bag. That's a little convenient.
Hey, it's the only way you got to do it. I mean, if you're camping, you got to put every single item you have in that sleeping bag, because at the end of the day, you might be able to have to run off that sleeping bag, I guess. It might be smart.
Well, in the military, especially up here in Alaska, you put your clothes in the bottom of your sleeping bag to keep them warm. So when you get up, you put them on. But that's clothes. We didn't put like our guns and cigarettes and tobacco and everything else in there, So I don't know. Maybe that was what they did back then, but it's just a little weird. He had everything he needed in his sleeping bag with him. But then this is actually my first book, but the last one I'm going to tell you about is Abandoned: The History and Horror of Port Chatham. It was my first book. It's probably my most popular book. It's sold, I think I can say, thousands of copies at this point. It was actually an Amazon #1 bestseller for a little while. Was it Pacific Northwest History, which is kind of like being #1 in underwater basket weaving, but I was still an Amazon bestseller. So I can say that I'm an Amazon bestselling author. I've got to show you guys this real quick. I don't know how well it'll come up on the camera.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's a interesting impression we found in Port Chatham. I'm not sure what that is. I mean, I guess it could be a bear, but
it's 3 times the size of that boot, and you're wearing a boot, or whoever's wearing a boot in that picture.
That's a size 10. Yeah, that's a size 10 adult male boot. And it just has a weird kind of almost I don't know what it's called, not an arch, but the toes, it's almost like big toe and then smaller toes. It kind of comes down, not like a bear footprint would. So that's one of the most intriguing things we found while we were there in Port Chatham.
No, that's awesome.
Say, at some point, we'll have to have you come back on and talk about the whole Port Chatham thing, because we didn't really get a chance to get into that one today. That's definitely a fascinating story.
Yeah. I can't believe we talked about Alaska and Bigfoot and didn't mention Port Chatham. That's usually one of the first places it goes.
Hey, it gives us leeway for the next conversation. Gives us something to talk about. We can just mark it on the list.
That's
right. We'll save it for part 2.
And if anybody wanted to come and find your podcast, I'm assuming your books are on Amazon, but you may even have like a website, a personal website or something for them. Where can people find your